a promising development in the fight against Ebola. It's an experimental vaccine, and the first results are just in. In China, Ebola fears and a crackdown on illegals hits the African community hard. And Melinda Gates receives a top honor for the Gates Foundation's work in Africa. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We start on a hopeful note. U.S. researchers say an experimental Ebola vaccine is showing promising signs during its initial testing.
The results with the higher dose were really quite favorable. Virtually all of the people who received the higher dose got a very robust antibody response, which is the classical response that vaccines elicit. So that's good news, and that's the response that was comparable to the responses that we saw in the animals that were ultimately protected.
The news from the National Institutes of Health comes as the World Health Organization reports the death toll from Ebola outbreak in West Africa nears 5,700 amid signs the spread of the virus is slowing but has not stopped. The UN agency says the number of newly reported cases is stable in Guinea and stable or declining in Liberia, but may still be increasing in Sierra Leone, which accounted for nearly two-thirds of all new cases. The continuous spread of Ebola has health researchers at NIH and around the world scrambling to find a vaccine to fight off the disease.
When you're dealing with vaccines, there are always little glitches that arise that might delay it one way or the other, but for the most part, we're hoping to start this much, much larger efficacy trial in first Liberia to determine if it actually works.
The NIH director says the vaccine could be put to its first major test by the middle of next year. Well, China has not recorded a case of Ebola, but the disease is affecting trade in southern Guangzhou, the city with the biggest African population in Asia. At a time of anxiety over infections, authorities have launched an intensified crackdown on visa overstayers and illegal businesses. VOA's Bill Ide recently visited a key African trading hub in the city.
This narrow underpass used to be bustling with food hawkers and others selling cheap trinkets for African traders to take home. Now police are swarming the area. Red banners are draped along the streets, loudly broadcasting the crackdown. Others give cautionary messages about the Ebola epidemic in Africa. One warns, Ebola, there's no vaccine. Shop owners say business has taken a serious hit.
Of course we worry, but that's all it is a worry. There is not much one can do. We still have to make a living for my family.
African traders are also feeling the economic pinch. Some, like Lam and Ann, wonder just how much longer they can go on.
If they see you that you are black, exactly from Africa, they obviously start running away from you. Then the business is not okay right now.
And it's not just Chinese who are concerned about contracting Ebola. Other Africans admit the epidemic looms over their interactions with others.
Of course, I'm a little bit scared because, I'm meeting different kinds of people, so I may not know who is who and who is well, or someone who's not okay. So it's somehow so scary.
But business must go on. Across the street in a massive high-rise, traders are restocking. One seller says they are confident long-term customers will keep placing orders, albeit online from overseas.
Ebola is definitely having an impact. Many of our customers are no longer coming here to buy, but that's not the only reason.
That other reason is the crackdown on Guangzhou's thousands of visa overstayers, going after visa violators at a time when it is also trying to prevent the spread of Ebola does not help build trust, says Heidi Hogan, a scholar who studies the African community here.
If there's a time that the Chinese government would need people to trust them, it's now. Because if something happens, then they need to, contain people. They need to get those who are at risk to the hospital or to isolate them. But there's a very real danger. I think that people will rather try to deal with it on their own
But some argue that China has no choice. Given its massive population, they say authorities must take tough measures to keep Ebola away. In the end, whether this approach helps or hinders Ebola prevention efforts remains unclear. Bill Ide, VOA News, Guangzhou.
Well, condolences are pouring into Australia following Thursday's death of Australian cricketer Phil Hughes. He was struck in the head with a ball during a match this week in Sydney. The team doctor Peter Brackner says the 25-year-old's death comes 2 days after the accident.
It was a freakish accident because it was an injury to the neck that caused hemorrhage in the brain.
Well, Hughes is the second cricket player in as many years to die after being struck by a ball. A 32-year-old South African player, Darren Rendell, died last year after being struck in the side of the head. Well, the streets are calm, but tensions are still high in the Missouri town of Ferguson. And the state governor says he won't convene another grand jury to review the fatal shooting of a black teen by a white police officer. As VOA's Chris Simpkins reports, allegations of extensive force by police have sparked violence in the past.
The shooting of Michael Brown by police officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri last August reignited long-standing tensions over race and policing. The unarmed teenager's death touched off days of riots and angry demonstrations in the predominantly African-American community. Sam Fullwood, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress in Washington, says racial unrest often stems from frustration among young African Americans who believe the system does not work for them.
You have racial discrimination, you have police brutality, you have economic disparity, you have housing discrimination. That breeds resentment. The reality of what happens, demanding to be heard on par with the elites in our society. That's the underlying cause.
The violence in Ferguson comes 23 years after outrage over the infamous videotape beating of African-American Rodney King by white Los Angeles police officers. Their acquittal on excessive force charges in April 1992 immediately touched off some of the worst rioting in U.S. history. The victim himself called for calm and racial harmony.
Can we all get along?
Despite pleas for peace, 55 people died and more than 2,000 were injured. Fires and looting caused more than $1 billion in property damage. Public policy expert Elsie Scott says African Americans who lash out often feel disenfranchised.
I think many of the people you find that participate in the riots are people who feel like they don't have power, and it's the only power that they have is to go out and set a business on fire that they cannot own.
In April 2001, police clashed with protesters after the shooting death of an unarmed black teenager by a white police officer in Cincinnati, Ohio. As in Ferguson, racial battle lines were drawn between the mostly white police force and the black community. Cincinnati police officer Keith Fangman says more needs to be done in the black community to change attitudes about how police do their job.
We need black leaders especially to come forward and say, we will publicly support an officer who uses reasonable, justified use of force when encountering violent suspects.
Some African American leaders say racial unrest could ignite again if minority communities continue to feel they're the target of police officers who use excessive force or who do not enforce the laws fairly or objectively. Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Washington.
Well, civil rights pioneers were among those honored this week by President Obama. He presented medals of freedom to 19 people who have contributed to America's diverse culture. Zlatsa Hoke has the story.
Family members of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner received the medals on behalf of the civil rights workers who were killed in June of 1964 during a campaign known as Freedom Summer.
James, Andrew, and Michael could not have known the impact they would have on the civil rights movement or on future generations. And here today, inspired by their sacrifice, we continue to fight for the ideals of equality and justice for which they gave their lives.
The three men, all in their 20s, worked to help small-town African-American communities in Mississippi and to register black voters when they were attacked by members of the racist group Ku Klux Klan and were killed. One former KKK member was convicted in their murders more than 40 years later. Rights pioneers also honored posthumously were African-American choreographer and activist Alvin Ailey, Congresswoman Patsy Mink of Hawaii, a Japanese-American, and Edward Roybal of California, founder of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Former professional golfer Charles Sifford, now in his 90s, was recognized for his role in helping to desegregate the Professional Golfers Association of America.
As Charlie says, I wasn't just trying to do this for me, I was trying to do it for the world.
The Medal of Freedom honorees also include Susan Harjo, an advocate for the rights of Native Americans. Harjo is an American Indian poet, curator, and educator. She also has helped Native peoples recover some of their ancestral land.
Because of Suzanne, more young Native Americans are growing up with pride in their heritage and with faith in their future, and she's taught all of us that Native values make Americans stronger.
Actress Meryl Streep is among the artists and entertainers recognized this year.
She inhabits her characters so fully and compassionately, saying, it's the greatest gift of human beings that we have this power of empathy. And off the screen, as an advocate for women and girls, she uses that gift to help others write the life stories of their choosing and to encourage greater empathy in the rest of us.
Other honorees were Chilean-born writer Isabel Allende, journalist Tom Brokaw, Ethel Kennedy, widow of the late Senator Robert Kennedy, and singer-songwriter Stevie Wonder. President John Kennedy established the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1963. Since then, it has been awarded to 500 people. Slavica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, Knowledge is Life. Highlights from VOA's Town Hall on Ebola. Stay with us.
If you come into contact with the bodily fluids of a person infected with Ebola, you must wash with soap and water immediately. I'm Dr. Conde Greaves. The Ebola virus is only present in the blood, feces, vomit, breast milk, sweat, and semen of people who are seriously ill. The virus must get into your body to infect you. Do not touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, and cover any cuts on the skin. If you are caring for someone who has Ebola, do not handle bedding, towels, or clothes that may be soiled with bodily fluids without gloves. Avoid sexual activity with male survivors of Ebola. Men carry the virus in semen for up to 90 days. Ebola cannot survive for long outside the body. Sunlight, heat, Clorox, and alcohol will kill the virus. Know the facts about Ebola. Knowledge is life.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory. With deaths from Ebola now edging toward 5,700, public health experts say all hands must be on deck to stop the outbreak. Voice of America recently hosted a town hall meeting tagged Ebola Knowledge is Life to engage our African audience. Ine Thompson from Nigeria's Channels Television was there.
In a special edition of Voice America's weekly program, Straight Talk Africa, host Shaka Sali and his producers brought together a studio audience of African experts and media with a panel of people on the front lines in the fight against Ebola. Sierra Leone Ambassador to the United States, Bakari Stevens, Ebola co-discoverer Dr. Malunga Miatudila, and 2 survivors, Dr. Rick Sakra and photojournalist Ashoka Mukpo. First, VOA Director David Ensor said that Ebola is more than just a news story. It's a commitment to coverage.
VOA has been reporting on this story, and I can tell you now we will stay with it for as long as necessary, even if other major media move on to other stories.
Delving to the crux of the matter, Dr. Malunga said this outbreak is the 26th since the virus was discovered in 1976. He says none have lasted for more than 3 months, unlike the current one. He cited a number of factors behind his thoughts.
It's because we, the human being, are going into the habitat of the birds. We are entering the new niches. So this is where we are meeting new friends or enemies, so that's the problem.
Sierra Leone's ambassador told the audience he appreciates every assistance, especially from the international community, but he asks that attention also be given to children who have lost their parents to Ebola.
Because many of these orphans will not have the kind of support that we might need. And the government that is coming from this type of catastrophe will be engaged in many facets of a nation's bringing it back to where from the brink.
Nigeria's success in stopping Ebola could not be left out. In response to my question, Dr. Rick Sakra, who caught Ebola in Liberia, said Nigeria did all of the right things.
Nigeria has done extremely well with universities, training centers, residency programs. You have a very well-educated medical workforce, and so you have people who are equipped to recognize this disease, to follow proper procedures in isolating it quickly.
And the town hall was not without emotion, especially when Ebola survivor Ashoka Mukpo made his plea to the audience.
I think everybody gets to choose what they care about in life and what's important to them. And for me, I think people who have privilege, people who have opportunity, it's a good thing to give back if you can. And you have to use your intelligence, so it's not just wanting to do good, but trying to see what you can actually accomplish to help people who are doing hard work. And I don't know, I just feel like it's a beautiful world, but we can make it better.
Amy Thompson reporting for VOA News, Washington, D.C.
Well, Melinda Gates, another champion in the fight against Ebola, is this year's winner of the Chatham House Prize, an honor bestowed by the prestigious Policy Institute of the same name. Mrs. Gates was recognized for efforts to improve the health of all Africans. Well, our Henry Ridgewell reports now from London.
Melinda Gates and her husband Bill launched their foundation in 2000 with the aim of improving lives through healthcare and access to education and technology. At a ceremony in London Friday night, Britain's Prince William paid tribute to her work.
With her equally remarkable husband Bill, Melinda set up the Gates Foundation to change the world, and change it she has, transforming the lives of women, the poor, the sick, and the disadvantaged in Africa and elsewhere.
The foundation is deeply involved in the fight against Ebola. Melinda Gates warned against generalizations.
People talk about the runaway Ebola epidemic, which is absolutely crucial to talk about, and it's devastating, but we also connect other issues to it that we shouldn't. We talk about a continent that's been ruled by dictators and corruption. We talk about Africa sometimes as hopeless. And I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely not the case.
Most recently, the foundation has given $5.7 million towards blood plasma trials as a treatment for Ebola. At an earlier presentation in London, Gates warned that the disease was knocking flat the health systems in the affected countries of Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia.
There'll be almost 800,000 births this year in those countries. The women aren't going to clinic now because, one, the clinics are being devastated, but two, they're terrified to go, that they're going to get Ebola. What's the biggest killer of women today, age 15 to 29? Childbirth.
Chatham House commended the foundation's work on the eradication of polio. The UN says Africa could be polio-free in 2015. The foundation has invested in mobile technology across the developing world, like this mobile phone app in Ghana, which has helped farmers connect to potential buyers and sellers. Melinda Gates has in recent years directed much of the foundation's work towards improving women's rights, health and education.
If I say, how in my lifetime can I double the impact of what the foundation has, it's by taking this gender lens and focusing on women and girls.
Access to contraception is high on the foundation's agenda.
Women will tell you over and over again, I cannot negotiate a condom even in my own marriage because I'm either suggesting to my husband that he has AIDS or that I have AIDS.
Melinda Gates follows in the footsteps of another globally known American female. Last year's Chatham House Prize winner was Hillary Clinton. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, still to come on Africa 54. No, they're not scavengers. They are the guests. It's a Thanksgiving feast with a twist. The details right after a review of Thursday's headlines. Stay with us.
We must hold our political and business leaders accountable for the consequences of their actions on us and this world we share.
Wherever you are, Voice of America is on air, reaching more than 130 million weekly, worldwide, in more than 40 languages. Online, social media, and breaking news from around the world. On the go, dozens of new features on popular platforms with new apps and trending topics. Voice of America, on air, online, on the go.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Fashion Week in Pakistan is all about fusion. Designs range from a vibrant collection that brought together the best of both the East and West to a daring neon-nude collection with hints of bare skin through a layer of ivory, wrist and black fabrics. Now, 14 more designers are scheduled to showcase their collections over the next 2 days to the fashionistas in attendance. Well, next up, beauty queens from around the world gather in London. 125 lovely ladies competing in the Miss World pageant took part in photo calls and interviews this week. Last year's champion, Megan Young, who represented the Philippines, was there with this year's hopefuls. London is the birthplace of the Miss World pageant, founded in 1951 as part of the Festival of Britain celebrations. The final ceremony takes place on December the 14th. And finally, a lucky group of lemurs gobble up a Thanksgiving feast. The staff of the Brooksfield Zoo in Illinois whipped up quite a meal. Now, the lemurs enjoyed a menu full of surprisingly traditional holiday fare, including a turkey made of biscuits, sweet potato pie with popcorn, green beans, sugar-free grape jelly with dried cranberries, and grape juice at a table with very lovely place settings. And that is what is trending today. Well, thanks to President Barack Obama, at least one turkey will not be the featured attraction at the Thanksgiving dinner table. The president pardoned a turkey named Cheese, granting it the chance to live out its days on a farm. Mr. Obama was joined at the event by daughters Sasha and Malia, who seemed less than pleased by Cheese. The presidential pardon for a turkey became a White House tradition decades ago. Well, another way Americans celebrate the day is with parades. Anush Averitsian takes us to one such event near Washington where a community's diversity is on display. Joe Wagner narrates.
Welcome to Silver Spring, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. On this cold fall day, a Thanksgiving parade is celebrating the diversity of its community. It's a chance for school bands to play their music and for athletes and acrobats alike to be on display. It also provides the unusual sight of costume clowns marching with businessmen in suits. The Thanksgiving parade has been a tradition here for years. Beginning as a small community event, it's grown with the city. Today, Silver Spring has a bustling, revitalized downtown that's home to nationally known companies like the Discovery Channel. The Thanksgiving holiday dates back to 1621 when early American colonists in what is now Massachusetts held a feast of Thanksgiving for their good harvest. Today, the religious aspect is a minor part of the observance.
Thanksgiving is a day about giving and giving back to people and being thankful for what you have.
Thanksgiving parades are held all over the country, but each community provides its own flavor. Here in Silver Spring, Latin American dancers march to the rhythm of African music, putting on display that multicultural community they live in. This parade is a carnival of happiness before a festive dinner with family and friends.
Food, fun, laughs, and just time with the family that we don't get to see that much throughout the year because we're busy.
Thanksgiving marks the beginning of the U.S. holiday season. It's a day that is rooted in tradition, where politics are put aside and the true American spirit, thankfulness for one's blessings, is celebrated.
Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That is Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night. We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA. I'm Vincent McCory from Africa 54. This is VOA. Follow us on Africa 54. Go to facebook.com/VOA Africa 54.